What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Ticket with Tippett, the best Dynasty fantasy football channel that you can find on all social media platforms. Today, we're going to be talking about players that you need to get off of your Dynasty rosters before free agency happens. Free agency normally starts around early March, so we're going to talk about a few players here today. We might talk about some in the future as well as we get closer to free agency and we get more information. But these are guys that I just feel you need to move on from as of right now before their value drops in free agency or after free agency happens. So if you're ready, lock in and let's get to the first player. Starting off with Deebo Samuel. Deebo's dynasty value is not going to get much higher than it is right now. This is probably the highest he's been. Obviously, he had a good 2023 season, but that 2021 season was where he reached his dynasty peak. And right now, he's probably at the highest he's going to be for the rest of his career. Coming off of a season where he played majority of the snaps as a wide receiver one in Washington, we don't know what it's going to look like going into 2026 and even after that. So as we mentioned, he's entering his age 30 season in 2026, which typically is a drop-off in production and volume for most wide receivers. And Deebo really wasn't like most wide receivers. He was playing a wide receiver running back combo position in San Francisco. And that's probably taken a toll on his body and part of the reason why he hasn't been as productive as he was early on in his career. I have listed on here that re-signing with the Commanders and being a number 2 behind a fully healthy Terry McLaurin could be bad for dynasty owners, as he's probably going to lose target share and volume in this offense in Washington if he decides to re-sign. And I mean, how many teams is Deebo truly a wide receiver one on? There's not many in the NFL that I could name off the top of my head. Tennessee would obviously be one. If he went to Tennessee, that be one of the best case scenarios because he'd likely be a wide receiver one. But other than that, there's not many places that Deebo can go and land and you feel comfortable that he is going to get the highest version of himself out of his play style. And also looking here at his slot numbers, slot guys are known for getting peppered with targets and getting a high volume share in an offense and target share. Deebo ran the most slot snaps that he has in his career, and he doubled the amount of slot snaps that he's normally played in his career in any given season. So 2025, he had 287 slot routes run. That's 63.5% of his routes run. That is an absurd number for a guy like Deebo. And he was known as somewhat of a slot guy where he could move in and out, be a true X or a Y, and then kind of come inside and play that slot. This year, Washington used him specifically in the slot. It wasn't even close. He played, about 30% outside wide receiver position. So the slot numbers are going to come down more than likely for whatever team he goes to. He's not likely to re-sign with Washington just because they're probably going to move on to, a younger receiver, possibly in the draft, maybe free agency, somebody like Romeo Doubs, who we will get to here in just a second. So make sure Deebo is off your dynasty rosters moving forward. There's just no reason to keep him on your team, especially if you're a rebuilder. This is the perfect time to trade him if you're a rebuilding dynasty team. If you're a contending team, you can make an argument to why you should keep Deebo. Maybe he does have value left for that one season that you have left to go for a championship and actually contend. Obviously, all of these depend on what your team situation is. I'm not going to tell you to go trade Deebo and, he's your wide receiver 2 on your bench, right? So he's like a second flex option for you. I'm not going to tell you to trade Deebo because that's a good depth piece for you to have as a contender. So a lot of these guys are people who I feel like if you're rebuilding or you're trying to pair somebody with another player to get a superstar, these would be good guys to trade. So Romeo Doubs is our number 2 player that I'm going to tell you to trade because his dynasty value is literally at an all-time high. He has never been this highly ranked amongst all fantasy platforms. Romeo Doubs in dynasty, he's going into 2026 as a free agent, so things could drastically change. If he goes and signs with a team that has no real target share competition for him, then it's going to be a good thing. But there are some concerns that I have for Romeo Doubs just in general when it comes to his play and especially injuries. Like he's concussion prone really for most of his career. So that's kind of dropped him off. There's no doubt that talent is necessarily a problem. It's just that the injuries and his drops. He drops the ball a ton. You can see right here, he has high drop percentages all throughout his career. So 3+ drops in all of his seasons. And in some of his seasons, he didn't even really play as much as a normal wide receiver. And he still had that high of a drop percentage. So that's a real problem for Romeo Doubs. And if he becomes the number 1 receiver, they're likely going to see that number rise because if he's going to get more playing time, then that's going to happen. So one thing, I think he's very comfortable in the Green Bay offense. So I do see a scenario where he probably re-signs with them, and that wide receiver room is crowded as it is. And I don't think that him being reinserted into that Green Bay offense is going to help him at all in Dynasty fantasy football. And like I mentioned, if he is signing with a new team, where does he fit in and what kind of role does he play? And is he really a wide receiver one for an offense? No, he's probably a wide receiver two. And at age going into his age 26 season, I just don't see where he's able to be of higher value than he is right now. Right now, he's heading into what is considered his prime. It's fair to say that Romeo Doubs is, after this season or next season, is going to go through, his regression in his career. So let's trade away Romeo Doubs. He's bad after the catch. His contested catch rate is outside of the top 100 receivers in the NFL, and those drops are just a real problem. So bad in contested catch, bad after the catch, and drops the ball more often than other receivers. It's just not a good combination. And if he goes back to Green Bay, it just makes it even more confusing and worse for dynasty owners. You will never know when to play him if he goes back to Green Bay. Let's just take this time, delegate trading Romeo Doubs away from your dynasty team and just get rid of him, because he's going to be one of the most confusing players moving forward in dynasty, and his value is too high right now to not capitalize off of that. So now we're going to talk about Zay Flowers, and a lot of you guys are probably questioning why Zay Flowers is on this list. He's actually 25 years old. He'll be midway through his 26-year-old age at the 2026 season. He's still really young in terms of an NFL wide receiver. So is Romeo Doubs, but I mean, I just don't think Romeo Doubs has near the potential that Zay Flowers does further into his career, just with the style of play that Zay Flowers has versus Romeo Doubs and the injury history compared to Romeo Doubs as well. So Zay Flowers, he's been kind of like the perfect flex wide receiver two, wide receiver three receiver for your dynasty team or your fantasy team in general. And throughout his career, he's never had a extremely high ADOT. His ADOT ranked 141st for all wide receivers in the NFL, and that's just not really his style of play. But when you have an offense that's probably likely to regress, those teams are going to, buckle down onto the line and really force pressure on this Baltimore offense. And it's going to be tough for Zay Flowers to get those passes thrown to him that he normally would get, like those quick slants, those out routes, the zig routes, the screens that he gets. Like those plays are not going to be there as often for a guy like Zay Flowers. And with him already being undersized and not really being to go over the top as much, I mean, sometimes he can beat you with his speed, but it's not a crazy amount of big explosive plays that he's hitting in this offense. With them likely being run heavy again, and they just extended Mark Andrews again. So Isaiah Likely owners, sorry about your luck. You guys just got thrown into the trash can. Zay Flowers is still going to have that competition with Mark Andrews, who's going to still clearly be the number one red zone target in this offense for Lamar Jackson. That's his favorite guy to throw to when they get down the field or when they need a big clutch situation on third downs. So Zay Flowers is going to be probably in a worse offense than they were in this year. They're likely going to try and add a playmaker at wide receiver. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is probably done after this season, I would assume. So they're likely going to try and add somebody to add to this wide receiver room, taking targets away from Zay Flowers. And overall, red zone targets are going to stay about the same for him. He's not going to get a ton of touchdowns. So it's good that he's not touchdown dependent, but going forward, I just don't know how we can sit down and really truly give Zay Flowers all this hype of being, like a wide receiver one, wide receiver two, when in reality, he's probably likely to drop to that wide receiver two, wide receiver three scenario. And people think Lamar Jackson's a good enough quarterback to feed Zay Flowers. So why not get rid of him and pair him up? Maybe if you have a Romeo Doubs, pair Romeo and Zay Flowers and go get like a top-notch wide receiver or a top-notch running back, depending on your roster construction. So this is the perfect time to trade Zay Flowers. Like I said, offense could be heading the wrong way. Plus, bottom note here, he ran the least amount of slot snaps in his career. So not really known as a true slot guy, but he is much better when he plays more slot snaps in fantasy. And now that he's going to be pretty much like double covered by any team that he goes up against next season. So, and his usage as an outside receiver just are not good. He's not as good outside. Like I said, he can't beat you on a jump ball. There's no way Zay Flowers is doing that. So he needs to see a lot of plays around the line of scrimmage in order to make plays like yards after the catch. But with this Baltimore offense likely being bad, I just don't see where that happens and how Zay Flowers plays better than he already has in his career. I think this is kind of like the ceiling for Zay Flowers. I mean, he already has done more, I think, than what people were expecting him to do in his career. Let's just take the advantage of having a key true wide receiver that people think is really good and just trade him and get the most value that we can for him because I think he's at his ceiling right now. Now let's move to the running back position. So we only have two more players left. This is five players. These are the five guys that I feel like you could trade for the most value right now, going into the 2026 free agency class. So, not all these guys are free agents, but there's one guy on this list or two guys, Zay Flowers, and then another guy later on this list that aren't free agents in 2026. But I feel like they could be hurt by free agency and what their teams do going into the offseason. So one of those guys that's not part of this, he actually is a free agent this season at running back, is Rico Dowdle. And Rico Dowdle obviously surprised everybody in the league when Chuba Hubbard went down for 2 games. He played against Miami and Dallas, and he absolutely torched those two teams, going for 200 plus scrimmage yards in both of those games. So there's no doubt that Rico Dowdle has the potential to be, kind of a 3-down back or an early down back in the team. I don't think he's a 3-down back because I think his receiving numbers are kind of flukish. If we look at his analytics here, his air yards per game, air yards per snap, team percentage of air yards, average depth of target, catch rate, drop rate, average yards after catch are not the greatest. So, I mean, most of those are in the red category and some of them are in the blue category, which aren't good. The green is obviously better. So he does have a good average yards per route run. But like I said, a lot of that came from the explosive plays that he had against Dallas and Miami, which were two, at the time, Miami was one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And all season, Dallas has been trash on defense. So anybody could have gone for 200 yards in that game that they played against them. Plus, he doesn't have a good positive run rate and a broken tackle rate. So he's not forcing people to miss him. Once you touch him, he's pretty much going to the ground. So which isn't a good sign for like a true RB1 going forward. I think he played a really easy schedule this season against the run. So, I mean, who's not going to succeed in that situation? And you would have thought that teams would have like came down and made Bryce Young, like forced Bryce Young to throw the football, but they just let Rico Dowdle do whatever they wanted because I think they truly didn't believe that he was actually that good. And I think now that teams know like he's seriously good, I think they will sit down and like actually game plan against Rico Dowdle instead of sitting down and trying to make Bryce Young throw the ball. So this is another guy that rebuilding teams can easily turn into future assets. So right now he's at an all-time high in his dynasty value. So use that to kind of rebuild your team or reload for next season if you're one of the contending teams. So I mean, you just got to sell high before he regresses because he's 27. This is not like a 24-year-old running back that just came over from a 1-year deal off of his rookie deal. Like, no, this is a 27-year-old running back who's kind of proven already that he was okay in Dallas. And they didn't really give him true opportunities in Dallas to be great, but he wasn't fantastic even when he did get those opportunities. So let's not act like this is just like something that he does on average. This is like one of those guys that like you got to get off of your team now because if he regresses and he goes back to what he was in Dallas or he goes to another team and is the running back 2 again, what do you do from there? You have nothing to do. He's going to be worthless in Dynasty for years after this season. But they're choosing Chuba Hubbard over Rico Dowdle in Carolina. I can tell you that right now. All right, and our last guy here is Dalton Schultz. Now, this is a weird one. I didn't put any quarterbacks on this list because there's like no quarterback free agency that's going to happen. I mean, maybe Mac Jones gets signed, but like that's somebody that you're probably going to want to add versus trade. I mean, maybe you trade him because he's going to get a starting job somewhere, but the quarterback position is just very bleak when it comes to the free agency, and there's not going to be many changes to what's already happening. A bad quarterback class coming in, there's not going to be much quarterback competition for the guys who are already in the NFL. So it's just not a position of need. So we're going to bounce the tight end here. And like I said, Dalton Schultz. Now, this one's strange because he's coming off of a really good season. And he's kind of been like, steady Eddie for most of his career. He had, 2 really good seasons, one in Dallas and one in Houston now this year. So, I mean, that was with rookie wide receiver competition, and he didn't really have a backup tight end that could give him any competition either. So he kind of just dominated touches and target share, alongside Nico Collins. And they didn't really have a run game. So Woody Marks did good for coming in, but that run game wasn't really something that defenses were extremely scared of or nervous with. And Nick Chubb didn't really provide anything coming off of an injury. There's not much that they were going to do in the run game. So Dalton Schultz really benefited this season off of just being one of the prime target share guys in this offense and a nice option for CJ Stroud because you can't always rely on rookies to make the right decisions in certain option routes and stuff like that. So Dalton Schultz really benefited this season off of just a collection of things in this Houston offense. So now I have this stat sheet pulled up. It's receiver analytics for, the top 4 wide receivers on the Houston Texans depth chart. So we're going to eliminate Nico Collins because we know who Nico Collins is. Like, we know he is the guy in Houston. Like, there's no question about that. So Dalton Schultz was the number 2 behind him. Going through here, Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins, and Xavier Hutchinson. The Iowa State Cyclones, or the Houston Cyclones, that's pretty much what they've made their wide receiver room outside of Nico Collins. These 3 guys have pretty much stepped up in a huge way. So a lot of their snap shares and snap percentages were not very high to start the season. It was a lot of Nico Collins and 2 tight end sets with like Kate Stover and Harrison Bryant and Dalton Schultz, or 3 tight end sets. And they were trying to dominate on the ground. They were trying to run the ball because their offensive line was so bad. They didn't have all their playmakers, like Christian Kirk was out. So they didn't really have everybody in their offense. They didn't have all the pieces together that they needed to, succeed. Joe Mixon has been out all year. That's been like a really disappointing thing for the Houston Texans because he was so good in 2024. So with all these wide receivers that are, Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins, both rookies this season, Xavier Hutchinson is going into his 4th season next year. So one of these guys is going to make that step up. And honestly, it could be 2 of these guys because I think Jaden Higgins plays a perfect outside receiver role opposite of Nico Collins. And I think Jalen Noel and Xavier Hutchinson fill in that slot receiver role very well. So with a guy like Christian Kirk moving on, I think that these 3 guys are going to elevate their game even more to help out CJ Stroud. They're going to get another training camp, another OTA session, another mini camp, another preseason, another season under their belt with CJ Stroud. And it's showing that CJ Stroud really trusts them because both of them just went off, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, that is, went off against the Chargers. So you got to expect that these guys are going to take a big step up in this Houston offense. And the more that CJ Stroud finds comfortability with them, the more that Dalton Schultz is going to tick down that target share in this offense. And more than likely, they're going to get a better run game next season with Joe Mixon coming back and having Woody Marks in the backfield as well. They're going to rely on that run game a little bit more with those 2 guys at the helm. Schultz had 102 targets in 2025. That's likely going to drop in 2026. He's only passed the 100 target threshold twice in his career, once with Dallas, once with Houston. And all the other seasons, his targets have not been crazy high. So it shows 98 on this 2025 season, but he did officially pass that this past week with 102. So it's not like he's sitting around the 100 target mark every year. He's normally around that mid 80s target mark, and that's likely going to be where he drops back down to in 2026. And he's a free agent after the 2026 season. So where is he going to go? Do the Texans actually replace him with another tight end, a young tight end that's going to be up and coming in the draft either this year or next year? Like, where do they go moving forward? Because tight end's going to be a need for them because Schultz is 29 years old. He's going to be in his age 30 season in 2026. So he's kind of at like an all-time high because this is his best season that he's had. Well, this is really like his best season that he's had in fantasy. You can't get much better than that for a tight end when you're looking at a career like Dalton Schultz, who's just kind of been, like I said, that steady Eddie guy who's getting you, the same amount of fantasy points each and every week, each and every year. So moving on from a guy like Dalton Schultz, if you have good tight end depth, move on from him. If you have young tight ends too, move on from him. Get somebody that you can pair him with. One of these guys that's on this list. That's the best thing to do is pair these guys who you just aren't as confident in and just move on from them. Move them to another dynasty team. Get them off of your team. Let those guys benefit from the one season that they probably have left that's pretty good and really gain value in a guy who's maybe, 26, 27, or maybe even 25 years old that you can really build off. Or if you're rebuilding, get future assets, get dynasty picks, rookie picks, get these guys who are going to be young future assets for your team that you can build off of. So that's the video today, guys. This has been a little cool video. I was able to dive into the analytics a little bit more of guys who I think just don't really have the future potential that they have right now. They kind of hit their ceiling, or they've had really, really good seasons, and you just need to capitalize on moving them off of your dynasty team and moving on to different pieces and building around those guys instead. We're probably going to do a similar video to this of guys who we should trade for before free agency because their value is going to get higher as it goes on. So look out for that. I will make sure to pin the link below to my quarterback rookie rankings. So we're doing quarterback rookie rankings on my WordPress. That's going to be in the description below. So make sure you comment below who you think you guys have as people you should trade away before free agency begins in March, and even players that you think you should trade away before the draft happens. Go ahead and leave those down in the comments below. Don't forget to like, don't forget to share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.